Quick question. Can your supervisors communicate, solve conflicts, lead with confidence? Anyone promoted from operations to management will tell you that the soft skills are the hard skills. That's why we created a program for technically minded folks to learn the right tools for today's leadership challenges. Tools like reading employee emotions, setting workplace goals, and communicating with a diverse workforce. Hungry for more? Get the details at shiftworkplace.co/supervisory leadership training. That's shiftworkplace.co/supervisory leadership training. Hello, Culture and Leadership Connections podcast listeners. Today, I'm really happy to present to you Gabrielle Dolan, who is considered a global expert in business storytelling and real communication. She is a highly sought after keynote speaker and best-selling author of 7 books. I'm going to ask her about those titles in just a minute. Her client list is extensive, including the likes of Visa, Amazon, EY, Uber, Accenture, Telstra, Australian Post, and the Obama Foundation. The professional highlight of her career so far is meeting Barack Obama while delivering storytelling training for the Obama Foundation. Wow, that's really great. Gabrielle is the founder of Jargon Free Fridays, and her dedication to the industry was recognized when she was awarded Communicator of the Year for 2020 by International Association of Business Communicators. Welcome, Gabrielle.
Well, thank you, Marie. I'm really excited to be here with you today.
Well, I'm really excited that you're able to take the time out of your busy schedule to join the Culture and Leadership Connections podcast. So please tell the audience a little bit about who you are. Give us the inside scoop.
Yeah, well, the inside scoop is I'm basically a teacher on how to tell stories more effectively. So I work predominantly with leaders in business, how they can become better leaders by communicating more authentically through stories, how they can bring their culture to life by sharing stories around their values and their purpose. I started this 16 years ago when I left my senior leadership role at National Australia Bank, which is one of Australia's largest banks, where I'd worked for several decades. And what I noticed is when I shared stories as a leader, they got more cut through. People understood them. In my last couple of roles at National Australia Bank in change management and project management roles, I also noticed that when you shared stories, people sort of got the message better and understood it and paid more attention to it. So having sort of designed and delivered a couple of leadership development programs, I sort of thought, perhaps I could do this. Perhaps I could teach people how to tell stories more effectively. So that's sort of the short story, but here I am 17 years later, have written several books that you said in your introduction and go around the world teaching people how to do it. And yes, as you said in the intro, the highlight was about 18 months ago when I was asked to run storytelling training for the Obama Foundation, which was an amazing experience.
It must have been really amazing. I wanted to ask you a little bit about your background in storytelling, because I also really use a lot of storytelling, and my family was a storytelling family. People would tell stories to each other, and it always has been a surprise to me that people didn't tell stories. Did you have that in your family as well?
I think I did. I think my dad was a bit of a storyteller. I often joke that I'm one of 8 children, so you sort of needed to tell a good story to get anyone's attention because there was a lot of competing voices. But I think, as humans, we're all storytellers, so we all tell stories, but there are certainly some cultures that, embrace storytelling a lot more. What I find frustrating is that we share stories to our children to deliver really good messages. We share stories outside of work, and we go into a professional setting, and for some reason think sharing stories isn't professional, and we then rely on facts and figures and boring PowerPoint presentations, and we lose that art of sharing stories in business. My friends would often joke with me that they can't believe I've got a career out of doing this, because they would say, these are my childhood friends, that I would be the one sharing stories down the pub or over dinner or over drinks, and taking something that was relatively normal that happened during the day, but finding a way to retell it in a way that was very funny. So I guess it's always been part of me.
It sounds that way. So can you share a couple of incidents from your childhood that you think made you into that person you are today?
You talked before about, did you grow up in a family of sharing stories? And I would say that my dad was definitely a storyteller. He would always share stories. So I think I got that from him. When I think about the person I am today, I think growing up in a family of 8 very much influences the way you behave and act. I am the sixth of the 8 children. And so when my mother had 5 children in relatively quick succession, let's just say over about 10 or 12 years, and giving birth to the 5th child, she almost died and my brother almost died. And in fact, they told my dad that they wouldn't survive. They both survived, but mum was told she shouldn't have any more children again. So there's actually a really big gap between me and my older brother. There's about a 5-year gap, and then she had 2 others. So we were always called the 3 little ones. And I remember when we would be playing like kids and fighting like kids. And if you ever went in and sort of complained to mum or dad about, Matthew did this to me or Alison hit me, and, the whole who started it, she hit me first, all 3 of us would get in trouble. That was still back in the day when, you sort of would get a bit of, smack over the hand, and mum would sort of go, that's for hitting your brother. She'd hit someone, that's for dobbing, and that's for just, I'm sure you did something. And it was sort of like collectively we all got in trouble. I think you learn really, really quickly to just sort things out yourself and not dob and not complain, because I think my parents sort of thought complaining was just as bad as doing it and sort it out. And I don't know, maybe it's when you've got 8 kids, you don't have time to get involved in all the little fights they have. So you just teach them to sort it out. When I reflect on that, I think that sort of helped form me to what I am about just get on with the job and figure it out.
Mm-hmm. And find ways around the obstacles.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember sharing another time, and this is again what my parents taught me, to just find ways to make it work. One of the very first jobs I'd applied for, I was literally 18, and I got an interview. So I went for the interview, and I, thought I went okay, but wasn't sure. And I noticed on the weekend that the job was advertised again in the papers. And so this is way back when jobs just used to be advertised on the weekend paper. And I remember saying to mum, I clearly didn't get the job. And she said, yes, but clearly no one else got the job either, because they've advertised it again. So why don't you reapply and, write a different letter? So I did. I wrote a much stronger letter based on what I'd learnt from the interview, and I got a second interview. And one of the things they asked me is, why did I apply again? And I just said, because I really want this job and I know I could do it. And I was offered the job on the spot. So again, I think that advice I constantly got from my parents is, don't keep doing the same thing and expect a different result, but don't give up. Just try something different.
Mm-hmm. And you also learned to have courage and to not back down.
Yeah, because, when you think about it, I was 18, and it's sort of like, I think most 18s would go, oh, no, I'm not doing that. That's too embarrassing or whatever. So, yeah, I guess there was a bit of courage in there, or maybe just, mum telling me to do it. So there was no choice.
So from the groups that you were born into, you're born in some area in Australia, there would have been a family, there would have been a social class around you. We were born into a race, you're a gender, there's born into a certain age. Like there's so many things that we're born into that we don't even realize. You may also have been born into a religious background, whether you follow it or not, that you were influenced by it, language, ethnicity, the things that you grew up in. What were some of the groups that really influenced you?
Yeah, so I was born in Melbourne, Australia, and I'm 5th generation Australian, which is pretty rare. There's, I think both great grandparents, were some of the very early settlers in Australia. So I was born into a very Australian white group. We were really close to our cousins. So I've been one of 8, but we also lived next to our cousins. There were 4 boys, and in a sort of, I guess, middle-class suburban street, in a time when you'd come home from school and everyone would play football or cricket on the road. You would always be playing with at least 10 kids, whether, your brothers, your sisters, your cousins, their friends. So I definitely grew up in that. My oldest cousin who lived across the road was a male. My younger brother was a male, clearly, and a lot of their friends would come over. So I was very sporty. I'd be playing with them. I'd be playing cricket. I'd be playing football. I'd be riding my BMX bike. It was a really active group that we were brought into. Even when we went on family holidays, there would be a whole group of mum and dad's friends, including my cousins and my uncles and aunties, and we'd all go to the same caravan park every year for 4 weeks and all have the sites, the caravan sites would all be almost form a circle, and it was a very close family group that we grew up into. So I went to a Catholic school, and that definitely influenced, well, I was going to say didn't influence me. It certainly influenced my parents, which then, what they deemed to be acceptable behaviour and unacceptable behaviour was very much from the Catholic view. And it was one of those weird things when I went to school, I did religious studies of all things, but you only learn about being a Catholic. And I still remember coming out of school at 17 thinking that everyone was Catholic and just didn't understand this concept that there was other religions in the world, which is pretty naive, that's for sure.
Well, that's your experience.
Yeah.
And many people have a very small experience and others have a really broad experience, but a small and deep experience is very important. It helps you to feel like you belong, helps you to feel that you know people at a deep level and you understand that local culture very, very well in a way that someone who wasn't born there and hadn't grown up in that would not ever be able to understand. It gives you bonding skills.
Yes, I guess it does.
Mm-hmm. So what about when you got beyond that circle? You had to choose a profession, you got educated at a higher level, you did different things, you met people from different cultures and different religions and different social classes. And you must have chosen something new to belong to, at least a profession, other things as well. Which of those have affected who you are now?
So you're right. It was moving into work and the profession you move into. And I probably didn't give that a lot of thought. It was, I actually wanted to be a graphic designer, but didn't actually get the marks I needed to get into the course I wanted to do. So having studied computer science at school, it was a subject that was literally just introduced. So this was back in 1984 when the whole concept of computers was pretty new. I got a job as a trainee computer operator. So I sort of fell into working in that industry and then got a job at National Australia Bank, which I said is one of Australia's largest corporates. So I fell into the corporate life. So I think the corporate life and that group has absolutely formed who I am. I would consider the people I worked with 20 years ago, I still see now that, some of them are my clients, but I loved working in the corporate world. I love working with them now. And a lot of clients have become friends. In fact, I created a term you can use when clients become friends or mates or buddies, and I've actually called them cluddies. So clients that become buddies.
I love it, cluddies.
Yeah, cluddies. And I have quite a lot of them. It was, it's interesting. I had a bit of a party for my latest book, and I did a book launch, which I always do, which is just an excuse to bring people together. So it was pretty important to do it this year. And I looked around the room, and I sort of said, I don't really have any clients here. They're all friends. But when I looked around, it was probably 50% used to be clients, but now they're friends. So they're cluddies, I guess. So the corporate world was very much a group that I became part of and still am and still love working with it. The other group that probably about 10 years ago, I became part of, and I would certainly call it my tribe. In Australia, we have this thing called Thought Leaders Australia, Thought Leaders Business School, and it literally is a group of people like myself that run their own business. So I run my own practice. There's only me, and I have a full-time executive manager. And, finding a group of people similar to that you can be part of is really important. So collectively, that group has inspired me to do more. They've been my support when I've needed them. We sort of mentor each other and advise each other. And again, some of those people have become really, really good friends of mine. And I think that environment has absolutely influenced me as well.
Because you had a collective family experience and then a collective experience in the corporate world. And then there you are as a solo business owner. And you would need a community because, well, everybody needs community, but I would think that would have been quite a shock to the system otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, definitely you go from, working in a corporate world, 9 to 5, 5 days a week in the office, speaking to people the whole time to just literally running your business from home. You do need, and I'm an extrovert, so you do need a group to be part of and to help you and support you, which is what this group did for me.
Hmm. Hmm. So everybody's born with a temperament, and then things that happen to them and the opportunities that they take, and whether they choose sometimes not to take the opportunities, their obstacles, their choices, all of that forms their personality. So let's start with your temperament. You said already that you're an extrovert. What else would you say you were born with?
I know I'm very laid back, so I'm like very casual. I love quotes. Well, some of the quotes I live by is it'll be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, it's not the
It's
end.
not the end
So,
yet. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm very much, if things are going bad, it's all right. It's just a phase we'll go through. It's a time we'll get through. So I'm pretty relaxed when things go wrong. And now, because I'm, this big focus on storytelling, when something bad happens, I sort of go, well, even it could just be a little minor hiccup, or it could be something, I sort of go, well, at least there's a story. Now I've got a story to tell. So
Hmm.
I see when things go wrong, there's a story and it's a learning opportunity. Also some of the things I've talked to you about, I find that when I look back at the pivotal moments of my life, it's when things haven't gone to plan. So if I had have got into the university to do graphic designing, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. The moment that I decided to leave corporate Australia was when I applied for a senior role and didn't get it. And there was a redundancy on the table, so I decided to take it. So it's sort of those fork in the road moments have always come when things haven't gone to plan and you decide, well, you know what, now I'll go do something else because of that. So I think I'm pretty laid back when things don't go right. And I'd also say I'm pretty willing to give anything a go. So, and maybe that's the combination of like, if it doesn't work out, it'll be okay. So just give it a go anyway. So the other quote I love is a life lived in fear is a life half lived. So I think to me, it's just give it a red hot shot. And if it doesn't work out, then it doesn't mean it's a failure. It just means it didn't work out according to the original plan, but maybe the plan B was better.
Yes. Frequently, the plan B is better, in fact,
Yes.
because it's always be careful what you wish for. maybe, maybe
Exactly.
plan A would have been you thought you wished for it, and then you're going, what was I thinking? It seemed like a good idea at the time, but no.
Yeah. And it's like even when I decided to leave the corporate world and go out on my own and start my own business, we had 2 children, 2 and 5. And even part of me thought, well, if it doesn't work out, at least I would have had some time home with the kids and, I can always go find another job. So, yeah, it's a bit of just give it a go and see what happens.
Mm-hmm. That's temperament then. And then personality. What did you add on other than learning to be more laid back? You probably were already, because I'm still thinking back to your 8 kid family, you learned to take stuff in stride and to be tolerant. So what did you build on later?
I think the laid back definitely came from my upbringing. And it was just, I think, the way you have to be in a big, big family. So throughout my corporate role and even in the last, leaving corporate, I've always done a lot of professional development training. So, working in corporate, you get sent on a lot of professional development training, which is good. I learned that I had to do that myself, running my own business, that, the biggest asset my practice has is me, and I need to keep developing myself. I think the greatest leadership and perhaps professional development I've done is having children, because I think they often hold a mirror up to you to say the way they act is the way you act often. What I've tried to take on over the last, let's say while, I was going to say decade, I don't know how long it's been, is being a better listener. So one of the things that I am is I'm very action orientated. I just, see something, go for it. I love an internal challenge. And I know that will often prevent me from just stop and listening to what's going on when someone's going through a period that they need to work through, whether it's at someone that works for you or, like I said, it's one of my daughters, just to be there for them and not automatically go into action mode, which is my absolute default. And I have to stop myself from doing that. I think it's my oldest daughter has taught me that, where she'll go, Mum, I don't need an action plan. I just need you to listen to me. I was like, okay. So yeah, that's what I've been working on. That's what I've been trying to adopt.
Children really have that way of holding that mirror up in so many different ways that you can choose to ignore it, but at your own peril, right?
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. You can choose to ignore it. And I think a lot of people go, just ignore it, what would they know? But it's at your own peril. I remember just another, well, it wasn't funny at the time, it's funny now, is one of the professional development things I do is I've done a couple of Harvard, executive education short courses. And I remember going on one, it was an adaptive leadership program. And they said that you should ask 3 people really close to you that if they could change one thing about you, what would it be?
Good question.
And yeah, it was a great question. And I remember the night before I left, we were out for dinner. So my husband and my 2 daughters, and I asked the question, and instantly, Alex, who's my oldest daughter, said, I wish you would admit when you're wrong. I was blown away and shocked. And I said, I don't think I have a problem at all admitting when I'm wrong. And she just looked at me and said, I rest my case. It was like, okay. And again, I went to Harvard with a colleague of mine and I was telling her and she just went, well, there could be something in that. And I go, I know there's something in that. That's all good. We'll work on that at Harvard.
That reminds me a little bit of I have 4 children, and my second son and my youngest daughter had these deep conversations about things every once in a while. And he was going to get married. He said to his little sister, who was a teenager at the time, I want to be a good husband. So I think you should tell me what I do wrong so I can correct it and be a better husband. That was a really, open yourself up to be shot kind of question. And so, of course, she just gave it to him. He was like, whoa, I didn't realize I had so many things to fix.
That is a brave question to ask your little sister, that's for sure.
Well, I was just thinking about, you asking that question and opening yourself up to your children jumping in to say right away what they thought. So it's kind of the same thing.
My younger daughter, she was probably only about 10 or 11 at the time. She said, the thing that I wish I could change about you, Mum, is sometimes I say, is it going to be hot or cold? And you say it's going to be hot and it's not really, it's a bit cold. It was just like, I go, there's a weather app you can get for that. And it was like, my husband very, very wisely said I wouldn't change a thing. He's a very wise man.
Brilliant. That was correct from a husband.
Correct from a husband. Correct answer.
But from a child, it's great that they're so honest.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. My Alex, who said, I wish you'd admit when you're wrong, she literally just got a job yesterday and there's a lot of proofreading. And they asked her, why does she like proofreading? So she's a brilliant proofreader. Why does she like proofreading so much? And she said, because I like to be right.
The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, does it?
It does not. It does not at all.
Okay, so that was really interesting. Can you recall a time when you became aware that the way you see the world was in fact just specific to your culture and not just normal? And I think you mentioned that already when you said you thought everybody was Catholic, but was there another time when you felt that there was a big shift and a kind of an awakening to the fact that you actually have a cultural context?
Yeah, that was a moment when I remember I started my first job and they'd asked me, am I Catholic? And I went, yes, thinking, isn't everyone a Catholic? And then they called me a Mick. I'd never heard that expression. I'm going, what's a Mick? And they go, well, that's what we call Catholics. And I'm thinking, well, what are you? It's like this was so naive. But anyway, I would almost say another happened really recently. It literally happened in the last couple of weeks. For the first time, I travelled to Northern Territory in Australia. So we are lucky enough to be able to travel domestically now post-COVID. And I went on a trek. So me and my husband went on a trek with a group. We were raising money for Sister Works, which is, I'm an ambassador for Sister Works that helps migrant women. But going through the Northern Territory, so this is Central Australia. This is, where Uluru is, Ayers Rock, the Red Centre. It's a very strong Indigenous culture there. And leading up to the trip, because I'm fascinated with our First Nations people, their ability to share stories. We talk about the power of stories. They've kept their culture. Australia's First Nations people is the oldest living culture in the world, 65,000 years, and they've kept it alive through stories. And so I did a bit of reading about that, but going on these tours, and we did a whole lot of tours, you were hearing the different culture that still exists now in Australia. And I sort of talk about, I'm 5th generation Australian. Well, that's clearly 5th generation white Australian after settlement. And just to have an understanding of a culture that has been alive and going for 65,000 years is sort of mind-blowing. And I think it's something more Australians should be proud of, and we should work more closely to understand that culture. The 10 days spent there was an awakening for me.
That's wonderful. I really love that. I think we all need to have multiple opportunities to learn from the Indigenous peoples of the countries in which we live, because in every country around the world, they've been marginalized, and yet they hold the key to how we can organically reintegrate.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we need to educate ourselves and listen and work more closely with them, and not just be a token and tick in the box approach.
Mm-hmm. That's something I've been focusing on, is interviewing First Nations and Indigenous peoples from Canada. And I'm trying to hit every province in my country and then move out from there.
Oh, excellent. Well, that's a great initiative. Great initiative. I'm sure you will uncover amazing stories there.
I am finding the most amazing stories. I can't even tell you. But of course, everybody's story is important. It's just that the stories that go so deeply into the beginnings of humanity and that have been through so much trauma and marginalization and cultural appropriation, they're particularly important for everyone to hear. So That was a great example. We're coming to the end of the interview, and I wanted to ask you, when people work with you, what would you say brings out the best in you? What kinds of things do you need to be able to be at your best?
That's a really good question. So now, I would have said in my corporate days, early days, for me to be at my best was have a manager that completely trusted me, that completely said, you've got this, you've got this. So I absolutely try to do that with my, one and only employee. When I'm working now with people, it's quite, I'm the teacher, I'm the mentor. So I'm helping them be their best. But when I love doing that is when I'm working with a client that just truly values what I can do, is open to learn. And it sort of becomes a partnership where it's not teacher-student, but they challenge me, I challenge them. And it's really built on a platform of trust and respect. The really cool thing, I guess, or the added advantage of storytelling is to me, it's about you share stories to communicate your message more effectively. But every time you share a personal story, you build trust and you strengthen a relationship. So the fact that I can work with an individual or a group or a whole team or a whole organization is, every time I run that training, I get to really deepen the relationship with the client. So maybe that's why a lot of my clients become cluddies. They become friends, because the very nature of what I'm teaching them is that we're strengthening the relationship.
Open to friendship, maybe.
Yeah, maybe it is. It's and to me, a lot of people go, "Well, business is business. Don't take it personally." It was like, why? Why do we not have to make business personal? We're humans. We're emotional people. We like to connect with people. And I think that phrase of "do work you love with people you like," I would prefer to do work I love with people I love. And there's a lot of clients that I would just say I love working with them.
And just imagine the whole world all working, doing things that they love with people that they love. What a wonderful place this would be, and how much human potential could be built that's just been latent up till now.
Yeah. And just how much better work we could do together.
Yes.
We're coming from this place of just, let's trust and respect and be friends. And we do amazing work together, I think, then.
We do. Love is kind of the key, isn't it?
Yeah. We could almost write a song about that.
We could. Well, so we'll share your information in the show notes so that people can get a hold of you. And I'm just wondering if you have anything else that you would like to say before we come to the end of the interview.
I think I might say to your audience that if you've never entertained the concept of storytelling in business, I would say think about how you could use it to both better connect with your employees, better communicate your culture and strategy, and connect with your customers in a really authentic way. It's a really underutilized skill, and it is a skill. It is a skill. It's a lot harder than it sounds, but it takes a lot of courage to do. So I would say if it's something you're interested in, there's a lot of free stuff on my website, which will be in the show notes. Give it a go.
Wonderful. I would be surprised if you didn't have many people flocking to you, seeking your services and your resources and wanting to read your books. I'm certainly looking forward to reading Magnetic Storytelling.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be a wonderful read. I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, I actually really loved writing that book. It was I got the opportunity to interview so many people and so many companies from around the world that have just got a really inspiring stories and doing really, really good stuff with storytelling. So I just had a whole lot of fun writing that book.
Sounds like a lot of fun to read too. So thank you so much, Gabrielle, for taking the time out of your schedule to tell us a little bit about who you are and to delve into the questions of culture and leadership and to be such a good sport about it all. Thank you. I really appreciated this time with you.
Thanks, Marie. I've really enjoyed it as well.
Gabrielle Dolan grew up in a family of 8 kids, where she had to learn to tell a good story to be heard and develop team player skills early on in her life. Her past experience in corporate banking culture contrasts with her current business of writing and teaching storytelling, yet she carries the warmth and sense of community with her into each new context. What a pleasure it was to interview Gabrielle Dolan, and I anticipate diving into her book about magnetic storytelling with enthusiasm. If you love this podcast, make sure you head over to theloveofthepodcast.com/culture and leadership to find a spot to give us a review. Or, if you're in a hurry, a rating. Thank you for listening, and may culture and leadership connections continue to guide and inspire your day. This podcast would not be possible without the expertise of our Culture and Leadership Connections production team. A big thank you and shout out to Mike Kurlander for audio production and editing, to Malvika Kathpal for the show notes, Bernadette Guadiz for online web and social media management and promotions, Celine Bayogo for design, and Kirsten Hoyer for website and branding. Thank you so much. Are you a big Culture and Leadership Connections podcast fan? Our Patreon platform is the most versatile way to hear podcast episodes, cross-cutting theme discussions, and watch VIP podcast guest videos. You can download the app to your phone and listen wherever you are. Check out the subscription levels for perks that appeal to you. Feel good about helping us cover podcast production costs while enhancing your listening experience at the same time. Go to patreon.com/culture and leadership connections. That's spelled patreon.com/culture and leadership connections.